week involving the nation's top law enforcement officials and former President Donald Trump. On Monday, the FBI executed a search warrant on the former president's Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, as part of an investigation into Trump's handling of presidential documents, including classified information. This followed a subpoena issued to him this spring regarding documents the department was seeking. The FBI search led to a furious response from the 45th president, but until this moment, neither the Justice Department nor the FBI have commented. We will be bringing you those remarks in a moment. With me here is Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa. Robert, we just learned that subpoena was issued back in the spring. What is the timeline here? Why is that so significant?
CBS News has learned new details about the chronology of this entire episode. It was preceded by a grand jury subpoena, a federal grand jury subpoena, back in the spring. Then federal agents met with the president's team at Mar-a-Lago, the former president Donald Trump. But then it led to this search this past week. Based on our reporting, some sort of breakdown and tension between that subpoena and meeting and what happened this summer.
Also here with me is Catherine Herridge, our investigative correspondent. And Catherine, what Robert just laid out is important because it lays out that there were legal steps before this unannounced visit by FBI agents. And let me go to Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Good afternoon. Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear that the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings and its work. Just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week. That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause. The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter. Faithful adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor. Under my watch, that is precisely what the Justice Department is doing. All Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law, to due process of the law, and to the presumption of innocence. Much of our work is by necessity conducted out of the public eye. We do that to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans and to protect the integrity of our investigations. Federal law, long-standing department rules, and our ethical obligations prevent me from providing further details as to the basis of the search at this time. There are, however, certain points I want you to know. First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly. Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken. Third, let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors. I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. The men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants. Every day, they protect the American people from violent crime, terrorism, and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so at great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. This is all I can say right now. More information will be made available in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney General, the former president said this is
FBI agents?
Thank you all for your questions, but as I said, this is all I can say at this time.
You just listened to an extraordinary press statement, not press conference there, from the Attorney General, who said he is unable to answer questions that you heard reporters shouting to him at this time. But as the Attorney General just laid out, he personally approved that this search warrant be used to go into Mar-a-Lago, the 45th president's Florida home, to search for documents. Catherine Herridge and Robert Costa are still here with me. And Catherine, we heard from the Attorney General that they are going to be making public some of the legal documents.
Correct.
In order to explain why this search happened. Now, everything has become highly politicized, highly scrutinized. Revealing these documents will tell us what?
Well, it's highly unusual to unseal a search warrant in an ongoing investigation, so this clearly shows an effort to be as transparent as possible. What you would see in a search warrant is the underlying evidence, or what the Attorney General just called probable cause, that he confirmed had been signed off by a federal court before the warrant was executed. It would also include what they call an inventory or receipts. So when the FBI agents finish their work, they provide you with paperwork saying, these are your possessions that we have taken that could be returned in the future. And finally, he stood up for what he felt was the unfair criticism of the FBI agents who carried out that raid. He said, I won't stand by while their integrity is questioned. But again, an extremely exceptional set of circumstances. But significantly, the Attorney General is saying, we're going to let the motions in the court and the paperwork speak for us. We're not going to answer your questions.
And the Attorney General making the point that it was the former president himself who issued a statement revealing
Correct.
and confirming that the raid happened, and that he could have made some of these disclosures himself, but has chosen not to. Now the federal government will. Robert, I mean, you've been talking about the political impact of this. There will be scrutiny of the Attorney General, who is a Biden appointee. The head of the FBI, however, Chris Wray, a Trump appointee. Those were FBI agents who went in there and conducted this unannounced search warrant visit to Mar-a-Lago and removed items from the former president's home. What does this become in our sort of public discourse now? The fact that we will have this public disclosure of what was used to justify this search.
This was an extraordinary moment in American history. An Attorney General took ownership of the decision to have this search of a former president's home. He stood by that decision. And now, with his remarks, we understand that this investigation, a grand jury investigation of how a former president and his associates handled documents, has gravity to it, is seen as a very serious probe by the Attorney General of the United States. We know they're talking to associates from the president's inner circle. They're going into his home to get boxes of documents. The question now is, what were they trying to find? What have they been told was in the documents in terms of information from the administration, national security documents? What was in there? The Attorney General underscored today with almost a rhetorical marker that this matters to him, and it's very serious.
And we know that the Biden White House, Catherine, has made a statement saying they had no advance notice of these remarks today or that this revelation would be happening. In terms of the legal mechanisms with law enforcement, what does happen next?
So practically speaking, when you unseal a record in the court system, you can go into a public filing and it's no longer with a restricted header. It then becomes available for review.
So the public can read it?
The public would be able to read it. My question in this case, Margaret, is whether there actually may be some redactions in these documents. Just because they're going to be publicly available doesn't mean that all of the information will be there. They'll want to protect sources and methods, and that may well be evidence that became the court's probable cause to get them through that door to a search warrant for a former president. But this is an incredible amount of transparency that you never see in an investigation. These warrants usually stay sealed until the investigation is over or a decision is made whether to pursue charges.
And this all has to do with documents the former president took with him to his private home. And the question now is what was in there that so justified these extraordinary actions and this search. And we will have continued coverage. I know all of us have phone calls to make. Catherine and Robert, thank you so much for your analysis. Our coverage here on CBS will continue on the streaming network, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington.
And you've been listening to a CBS News special report regarding the FBI search of the former president's home in Mar-a-Lago. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the Department of Justice has filed a motion to unseal the documentation that led to the search warrant
of the president's former home. Now, Garland said he personally approved the warrant. This was one of those notes on big, font that I took because it is an unusual move. We thought this was up to just up to a judge in Florida, a federal judge, but now we're learning that the Attorney General himself, understanding, of course, the critical implications of the raid, of the announcement.
He wants to take the heat. He wants to take the heat off the FBI officers who he says are being unfairly criticized and targeted for this.
He warned against the threats against the FBI agents. Something that I found fascinating, too, is, Tanya, the fact that he also said, look, it was the president himself who revealed this yesterday. And because he did so, because he opened up and mentioned that there was a raid in Mar-a-Lago and alerted the public, then he's taking this unusual step early on in this investigation.
Due to the intense public interest in this.
That's what he said.
We have standing by CBS News legal contributor Rebecca Roife. Rebecca, I want to ask you, though, does this move to unseal these documents that led to the search warrant, which is highly unusual, is that going to open up, any sort of legal jeopardy here in terms of any former prosecution? Because one of the reasons that these documents remain closed, is my understanding, is because if you're building a case against someone, everyone's innocent until proven guilty, so you don't create the case before you have the case, correct?
No, that's absolutely correct. I think that if the court signs off, however, it will be a judicial determination that it is in the public interest to make an exception to that general rule. And I think, that what Attorney General Garland was saying was that, in fact, the former president himself revealing part of the story, but not the whole story, is part of what creates that public interest. So that, in other words, it's almost as if he's trying to use this as a shield and a sword, and that's the sort of thing that distorts rather than simply hides something from the public. And so that in and of itself is problematic. So therefore, the court may determine that it's in the public interest to make these documents public so that the public can have a more full understanding of what is going on here rather than this kind of distorted one-sided view.
And that's what the Attorney General said. He said it was because the president revealed himself that he's taking these steps. It's because of the contents, and it's also because of the substantial public interest, perhaps because of all of the assumptions that were made between yesterday and today. Now, I am curious, and I'm sure many people in the public to understand, okay, so we're talking about the FBI property receipts, which detail what was taken, and the warrant itself. How much can we actually learn, and how soon would a judge approve of this motion to unseal these two sets of documents?
So, I think we actually would learn quite a lot if these documents were unsealed, because in order to obtain a search warrant from the court, the government has to establish probable cause to believe that evidence of a crime will be found at this particular location. And it has to catalog specifically what that evidence is. So you can imagine that that's significant. And if we were to have the answer to that, there would be that would give us a lot of information, because one, we would find out what it is that what crime they think was committed. And second of all, we would find out what support they have for that. So, I mean, that would give a lot of answers
So
here.
direct evidence.
Because people have been speculating, what was it that they were looking for? What's in there? Is it just that they were trying to get back some important national security documents? Are there further crimes that they suspect happened? And those questions remain questions until we have more information. And I think that information would come from an unsealed document. In terms of timing, I don't think this is the kind of thing that takes months and months. I think it should come fairly soon if it's going to come at all.
Right, because the Attorney General said he filed a motion to unseal these documents, and is that in your from your view, will that take hours, days, weeks?
I mean, I don't know exactly how long, but I don't think it would take, I certainly don't think it would take months. I think, weeks would be at the outside. I mean, I think this could happen fairly quickly. In a normal case, if you were to do this, it would be hours. But, there's some question about, just given the weight of this case and the import of this case, whether it might take some longer amount of time.
Right. So for more on this, let's also bring in former FBI agent Kathy Guider, who was with us earlier. Kathy, overall, listening to what the Attorney General said about unsealing these documents, does that help or hurt the FBI investigation, or is it neutral?
I think it's going to be neutral. They're going to do what they need to do, whether it's sealed or whether it's unsealed. It, might, if things aren't redacted, I was going to say, I think it will be heavily redacted, but it might tip off, who maybe the information was provided from. But I think, the FBI is going to continue to do their investigation, and it doesn't matter, really, it wouldn't have mattered to me. I'm going to continue to do what I would need to do in that case.
There's been a lot of speculation that there may have been a mole inside the president's inner camp. Would that be revealed in these documents?
So the informant would be, would that be part of what's redacted, or are we talking about, would that be it? And what's the risk of the information that is in the public's interest that may be redacted, being the contents of the warrant and the receipt and of the possible crime?
Right. It may be that they keep that person as confidential source, number one, or confidential source number two. They may not have used a name, and that might be a way that they've already, protected the person. The other thing I thought about was that, everything that was taken, there's going to be that inventory they're talking about, whether it's one item or whether it's 200 items. Every item's going to be listed out. In the case of classified documents, it may just say classified document number one, classified document number two, and so on, because of course they're not going to reveal any classified information, publicly. So I think, it's going to possibly take a couple, days, weeks to make sure that information that needs to be redacted or, kept classified stays that way. But the investigation is going to proceed.
Well, it was all in the interest of transparency. The Attorney General made that very clear. I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland back with us on the phone. Scott, you heard the Attorney General. I think a lot of this conversation has become political over the last day and days. Can you tell us a little bit more about, how you took this and what the political implications are of the statement and of what's to come?
First of all, I've read this motion filed by the Justice Department, just a few pages long, with the first paragraph is a piece of history. It says that there's been a search of residents of former President Donald Trump. Those words themselves are an iconic set of words in American history now. The reaction from Republicans ever since Monday's search has been unambiguous and emphatic. They have criticized the Department of Justice, accused them of overreaching, accused their FBI agents of potentially being rogue agents. There have even been criticisms from some House Republicans saying if they get control of Congress next year, they're going to defund or question the Justice Department because of this search. Okay. They did this with no visibility into what was taken, what the search warrant said, what the affidavit for the search warrant said. Well, they're about to get some visibility into that over the next few hours or the next few days. If the judge approves this motion to unseal the search warrant, potentially the affidavit, and they get to read it for themselves. But they've been forceful in their criticism of the Department of Justice for undertaking this search at all. Democrats, not having any visibility on this search either, have been a bit more muted in their comments, but Congressman Eric Swalwell of California has been particularly vocal since Monday. Just a few moments ago, posted, if Donald Trump has nothing to hide, he'll tell the court he supports unsealing the search warrant. And the former president's had the ability to show the search warrant or its receipt ever since Monday, just hasn't done so. There are toxic political divisions in this country. This may have heightened them further. We don't expect there to be a whole lot of persuadables in Congress, no matter what this search warrant says.
All right. Well, we also have CBS News Chief National Affairs and Justice Correspondent Jeff Pegues standing by. Jeff, you were at the presser. We all listened to the Attorney General Merrick Garland. And one of the things that struck me is how the plodding legal work of a confidential investigation makes such uneasy bedfellows with the lightning speed of our political climate and the way that people ratchet up whatever their impressions of an event, at lightning speed on political media. And it has such implications, and how that really, it was so hard for the Attorney General, as he was saying, he's revealing these documents because he's worried about the public outcry, how those two things don't mesh very easily.
And it's usually a slower process. And Jeff, can you speak to that, to just how unusual this is? And are you surprised that the Attorney General came ahead of this, given that, this is very much your field of expertise?
Well, there was a lot of pressure, and this, on the Attorney General to come out and make some sort of statement regarding the search of Mar-a-Lago. But today, he didn't make a statement. What he said was, well, he made a statement. But what he said was, we here at the DOJ, we're going to let the court documents, the search warrant and this receipt, which is evidence of the search of Mar-a-Lago, what he's basically saying is we are going to allow the court documents to speak for themselves. Because even though there's been all this pressure on the Department of Justice from Capitol Hill down the street to talk about what happened at Mar-a-Lago earlier this week, there are rules in place. And as I've said numerous times before, Merrick Garland, the former federal judge, he tries to go by the book. At least that's what he has told us over and over and over again. And what you had here today was the Attorney General threading the needle, making a statement, but not going too far, and relying on the court documents to make the statement, and also putting the onus on former President Trump and his legal team. Listen, if they want to quiet some of the critics, he is essentially saying, well, why don't you release the search warrant copy that you were given, or this receipt that you were given at Mar-a-Lago, or the former president's attorneys? They have it. They know what investigators were after. And so why don't they release it? That's basically what the Attorney General is saying in this statement that he gave us just a few minutes ago, because he believes that he is prohibited from talking about any sort of ongoing investigation. In fact, that's in the code of conduct, if you will, for the Department of Justice. And so he stayed away from that here, and as I said, threading the needle, and now putting the onus on the court system as well as the former president and his legal team to show the critics of the Department of Justice and the FBI this search warrant. Why were they there? Well, it's a relatively simple question that the former president and his legal team can answer themselves.
Jeff, we've all obtained warrants ahead of the end of an investigation and learned from those. We were just discussing, how heavily redacted these documents might come back to us if they do. Do you expect to learn a whole lot from, in this case, from these documents? And how unusual is it for the Attorney General to ask to unseal them?
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. We'll learn a lot more about that search than we know now. And that's the key here. We have some information, but we don't have all the information. We don't know exactly what it is the Department of Justice and the FBI is going after at Mar-a-Lago. After all these negotiations with the former president and his legal team, they decided on Monday to take the unprecedented step to go into the former president's residence. You don't do that kind of thing lightly. And in fact, the Attorney General, in that relatively short statement, that's what he said. He said, I approved what happened on Monday. He took responsibility for signing off on that operation. And that was one of the outstanding questions. We had reported that the top levels of the Department of Justice were aware of what was happening. Well, they were, and today you had the Attorney General say, hey, I knew that this was going to happen. I signed off on it. So he's essentially saying the buck stops here. However, what he's also saying, and all of this is unusual. All of this, we're going to look back and say, well, we covered this story. This is part of history because it is unprecedented for the FBI, with the approval of the Attorney General, to go into a former president's residence looking for documents, looking for papers that were allegedly taken out of the White House. So all of this is unprecedented. And what we're all wondering now is, where will it go? Even though some of those documents may indeed be redacted, there's going to be enough there where we can read between the lines. There have been other investigations where you actually had people sort of looking through the black markers, looking on the other side of the paper to see what they could see. This is going to be one of those situations again, because there is so much interest in this story and where it's going to go and what exactly the FBI was after in Mar-a-Lago.
And the key words being substantial public interest.
That's right.
That stayed with me from the Attorney General.
Absolutely. And we do have some words from the Attorney General we want to replay for our viewers, Jeff, and then get your reaction afterwards. So let's listen.
Let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors. I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked.
So the Attorney General is angry, Jeff. He's angry about the attacks, the criticism that the FBI agents and the agency in general is getting over this. Do you think that's part of what led him to reveal that, hey, I'm the one that signed off on this, target me if there's someone you're upset at?
It's, having covered him for at least a couple of years now, what I found about Merrick Garland is it takes a lot to get him riled up. And you're right. As far as Merrick Garland is concerned, that's the AG getting angry and riled up. And even though this was a relatively short statement, we know that he ran through the statement a few times, and I'm sure his aides were telling him, all right, hit that line, hit that. That's what happens. And he wanted to emphasize, boiling down what he said about law enforcement, what he was saying was, I got your back. Yeah. You're being attacked by people on Capitol Hill. You're being attacked by people out in the public, the former president's supporters. I got your back. Keep doing what you're doing. Nobody is above the law, that kind of thing. I'm with you, because they are being attacked right now about this raid. Some people call it raid. Some people prefer, the FBI certainly prefers to call it a search, and it was done respectfully, is what the FBI would say. But the fact of the matter is, law enforcement is being challenged right now. And it's not just this week. It's really over the last several years, in part because of some of the statements that the former president has made. Let's think back to his statement on Monday, where he said, under siege, raid. He used these buzzwords that his supporters, they grab onto it.
It's
and
all
they spread it
inflammatory.
around social media.
Yeah.
And some people, and this is the scary thing, some people take those words and then they act.
Yes.
And that's not me just saying that. That's law enforcement across the country, whether it's the FBI or local police, because some of these people cannot differentiate between federal police and local. They don't know the difference.
Right,
they are
Jeff.
just anti-government.
Yeah.
And so if you keep feeding that, you see actions along the lines of what we saw in the Cincinnati area today.
But
And so
Jeff,
the Attorney General was speaking to that.
But Jeff, then how do you marry that sentiment, which is coming from, the former president's supporters far and wide across the country, and when it actually comes out of the voices of lawmakers in the halls of Congress? I mean, that's
calling for the abolishing of the FBI. It's not just the president.
That becomes something a little different.
Right. And Jeff, I want to bring in Nicole Skanga, CBS News Homeland Security Justice reporter, because Nicole, we were talking about this earlier. You've been covering just the reactions, and you've been covering from a national security standpoint the consequences of this kind of language. We learned a grand jury subpoena was issued to Donald Trump for several documents before the raid at Mar-a-Lago, at his estate, at his personal residence. What do we know about the documents and what the DOJ was looking for, especially given that, we now have a little bit more information? And Nicole, I'm interested in what Jeff was talking about. Look, the FBI agents are well trained. We would not have the kind of democracy that we have without their investigations. I mean, they are looking into all kinds of, corruption and charges beyond, and it's an essential part of the security of this nation. And now we're hearing people at the top levels of our legislature, of our political power, saying let's abolish them. So let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what we know now and what you have learned in your reporting about the documents, but also about the state of politics and inflammatory language against the FBI.
Yeah, Lilia, I want to piggyback off of what Jeff just said, that important point. And of course, Attorney General Merrick Garland there saying not only he won't stand silently by as the integrity of DOJ officials, of FBI agents, as that is attacked, but he went on to, note that these are individuals, these are government workers, these are law enforcement officials who, prevent violent crime, terrorism, other threats to the safety of the American people. They do so at great professional and personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. And I do want to remind our viewers that this is not a challenge in the abstract, that, last year 73 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty. That is the highest annual number since the 9/11 attacks. And that's something that, of course, FBI Director Christopher Wray brought up just yesterday. 33 law enforcement officers died in the line of duty in the first half of 2022, according to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, an 18% increase in firearm-related fatalities among law enforcement across this country in the beginning part of this year. And so this is a very real challenge that we are seeing perpetuated in echo chambers online. It has presented a challenge to local law enforcement agencies who are already having recruitment and retention issues. It has contributed to a mental health crisis among law enforcement officials. And to Jeff's point, too, the distance between the former president's rhetoric and his supporters' actions is so very short. And that is a reality that we experienced on the sidelines of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. And so that is the concern. That is what keeps senior law enforcement officials up at night as they are, surveying, monitoring, and looking at some of the calls to action online on both encrypted and public platforms that tend to attract domestic violent extremists. Now, as to the investigation, to your first question, we do know that, FBI agents had removed about a dozen boxes from the former president's Mar-a-Lago estate. Of course, right now, we expect to learn more as the Justice Department files its motion to unseal that search warrant that permitted and directed FBI agents to do that. Thought it was very interesting that the Attorney General spent so much time really explaining the process, talking about, the court that signed off on the search warrant, upon finding probable cause, trying to, find the regular contours of this sort of unprecedented action by law enforcement.
All right, Kathy Geider, former FBI agent, believe you're still standing by. Can you tell us what happens next in an investigation like this?
Well, after the inventory and you leave a copy of that inventory, then that evidence goes back to the FBI field office. And the case agents, not the people that did the searching, they just did their job that day, but the case agents for this case would be the ones to review this. And I, have no doubt it's being reviewed as we're speaking. If there was 12, 15 boxes, whatever it happened to be, they're going through those and they're looking for the evidence, that they noted in their probable cause. And then all of that is going to be analyzed. And you have to do a search warrant return. And so that will be done. So their jobs, really, the search warrant was just one small part of it. It's just an investigative tool. Now they take that tool, that information, and they keep working their case as they go along.
I want to bring Jessica in back. Jessica, if you are still with us, I'm curious about...
I think it's Rebecca.
Oh, Rebecca Roike. Rebecca, yeah. Sorry. Rebecca Roike is joining us. I'm curious about the legal implications. We understand right now the next steps, the procedural part of it. But bigger picture, the question that is on every American's mind, in a case like this, and given the legal ramifications, what has already been laid out, does this get anywhere closer to an arrest of the former president? Could he be charged with a crime?
Well, it really depends on what is in those documents, what they're looking for, whether this was a piece of a broader investigation, whether it was its own discrete case, and none of that do we fully know right now. But the prosecutors who are assigned to this case are certainly looking closely and analyzing the documents in light of the investigation. If this is a part of the broader investigation that we've gotten hints of, then they're putting puzzle pieces together. And what one has to do at the point at which one would charge is to think, okay, what are the elements of the crime? What will we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? And do we have a way of checking off those boxes? Because we cannot bring this case unless we have evidence of each of those elements. Until we know what the crime is, we don't know what they're looking for. And until we know what the evidence is that was found, we don't know whether they have it. But that's what they're looking to put together. And I do think, we are in a position where we don't know what's happening. And again, as we were saying earlier on in the show, there's a real disjuncture between a criminal investigation that necessarily happens in secret. And that's what Merrick Garland was saying. Right. We cannot tell you what's going on, and the public need to know. But I think that what Garland is doing is the best thing he can do, which is sort of keep his head down and follow procedures exactly the way they are done in any run-of-the-mill case, because that's the only way to counter this rhetoric that this has become a completely politically motivated operation.
Consequences beyond just within the political space. The probable cause box is checked. What's next?
Well, we should learn more, right? When this search warrant is unsealed, which is supposedly going to happen sooner rather than later, right? Rebecca Roike, Jeff Pegues, Kathy Geider, Nicole Skinga, and Scott McFarland, thanks to all of you for joining us and helping us unpack this. We appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick break. More news is next here on CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
President Biden is calling for Damascus to release American journalist Austin Tice from captivity.
That's right. Tice was captured while reporting in Syria 10 years ago. President Biden says his administration knows with certainty that the Syrian government is holding Tice in its custody. The president is urging Syria to cooperate with efforts to bring him home. Mr. Biden made the declaration on Wednesday just in time for Austin Tice's 41st birthday, which is today. Austin Tice's mother, Deborah Tice, joins us now. Deborah, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us on what must be a difficult day for you, your son's birthday. When President Biden told the Syrian government to bring your son home, what was your reaction?